Okay, we're going to talk about the horrible, awful, disgusting mess of searching no service issues in the iPhone 6 Plus and the iPhone 6. So this is another signature problem, and it's one that a lot of microsolderers avoid. And if you want to say, I don't do that, then you are perfectly within within the reign of common sense to just say, I'm not messing with that. And here's why. Let's start by looking at the schematic to try to understand the general function of, hey, how does this phone make and receive a cell phone call? So let's compare that to something more straightforward like, you know, backlight or image, and just kind of see what we're up against if we were going to sort of draw a circle around all of the different dudes that could be part of a problem when a phone can't make or receive service, or it can't make or receive a cell phone call. So let's look at the schematic and let's see what we're up against, because remember, anything that is involved with the action of baseband is part of the deal for searching no service issues on any device. So let's see if I can find a schematic. Let's get rid of Lionel. Sorry, Lionel. And let's pull up our schematic screen and we'll look at the iPhone 6 Plus, since that's what I have first up here. So let's see. Let's just sort of scroll through the schematic a little bit. And all right, CPU stuff, CPU pages, CPU, CPU, CPU. CPU has a lot going on. Audio, couple pages for audio, couple pages here for your cameras, all the stuff the regular main power management chip does, Tigris. All right, here's something. Let's look at, hey, my phone doesn't have backlight. All right, well, if you were going to trace out a backlight problem, you'd start here at the backlight driver chip, and then you could kind of see here on one page everything related to making that driver chip work. And then if we followed that LCM backlight anode line, it goes from here to a filter. There's two caps and the connector. That's it. So any backlight fault is either here on this little square piece of one page, or it's going to be the caps or the filter connector on the other page. That's it. So if you're trying to solve backlight, that's all. Every dude that could possibly be affected is right there in front of you right now. And that's not true for baseband. That's why I want to kind of do this little exercise. So we'll speed through this really quickly. Let's find it. All of this is mainboard stuff. Mainboard stuff, lots of different functions. And then you can see that the schematic kind of, you know, takes a break. Look, here's a blank page. And that's because you have an entire separate team of RF engineers, RF guys that build an entire board, the bottom half of the phone, that has to do with this one function of making and receiving a cell phone call. All right, so here we get into really it's the second half of the schematic. So let's count pages here. So this page has stuff that has to do with making and receiving a cell phone call. All right, the baseband power management chip. There's its own power management chip just for making and receiving a cell phone call. So everything on that page is part of searching no service. Same as this page. That's page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, baseband. Transceiver, WTR transceiver, that's part of making and receiving a cell phone call. So what are we up to? 6 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages. This guy, this was part of making and receiving a cell phone call. 8 pages. Power amplifier for baseband, 9 pages. This page, that page, 10, 11, 12 pages, 13 pages. Antenna switch, that's part of making and receiving a cell phone call. I lost count, whatever, 13, 14, blah, blah, blah. GPS, technically not part of making and receiving a cell phone call. Antennas, and we'll skip Wi-Fi. And then we'll skip Stockholm, which is Apple Pay stuff. All right, so then that's pretty much it. So if we tally that up, here's the point here. Let's bring back Lionel and get rid of that. If we tally all of that up, we have 20 pages of schematics that are all different chips and different capacitors and different lines. We didn't even look at the baseband CPU and point it out, but we've got a baseband power management chip just for baseband and a baseband CPU just for baseband. And then we've got power amplifiers and transceivers and antenna switch. We've got all of these different dudes, and they all have to work in order for you to be able to call your mom and tell her you're going to be late. So if you want to say, I don't work on this problem of making a phone have service again, that's totally fine, because it's really, really, really open-ended. Your problem could be anywhere on these 20 pages. So for a long time, that was our strategy here, is to just say, nope, because if you think about it, a phone that doesn't make a call it still has value, because it's a perfectly fine iPod Touch. It can connect to Wi-Fi and you can do stuff with it. You can play music and, do all kinds of stuff, apps. And the gain in value to turn that iPod Touch into a phone is, what's the difference in value? A couple $100 maybe. And the effort that it takes to turn a phone that can't make a cell phone call into one that works is 20 pages of schematics worth of Easter egg hunt. So it's a big open-ended problem. And I wanted to kind of say that because there is so much please bro out there on searching no service issues. So keep in mind that when we start talking about signature faults, your baseband problem might not be the signature fault. It might be anywhere on those 20 pages of schematics. All right, end of rant. So now let's talk about the signature fault. So what do we know about iPhone 6 Pluses? We know that they are big and bendy and that they get touch disease like crazy. So touch disease is not related to baseband at all, but touch disease shares an underlying biology with the signature fault here for searching no service on iPhone 6 Plus. So what is it? If we think about how do we get touch disease, it's because the phone bends just from normal use, and we create tension on a little trace, the M1 trace that underlies one of the touch chips, the Mason chip. And so over time, you kind of pull and stretch that connection, and the connection becomes weaker and weaker and eventually stops working, and then you have no touch on your phone. Now, the same biology goes on at a different chip, and that chip is the baseband CPU itself. Now, the baseband CPU is a bigger chip than the Mason Touch IC, and it's unique to the device. You can't just swap it out with a new one. You have to take off the baseband CPU and reball it if you want that phone to work again. So you have to reball the existing chip, and you have to solve that original problem of pulled connection. So now, what is the signature faults? We've learned the same way that we as a community, through sharing information, figured out what's up really with touch disease and the M1 pad. The same thing happened here with the baseband CPU. So for a long time, ever since the 6 Plus first came out, people started trying to troubleshoot and trying to solve this problem. And it became really obvious after a while that when you say, hey, maybe it's the baseband CPU, let's re-hot, that didn't work, let's reball, and you take it off, that in the hands of microsolderers all over the world, a lot of times that chip would come off and it would pull a pad. It'll pull 2 pads often. And it was always the same 2 pads, no matter who the microsolderer was or where in the world they lived. Everybody was pulling off the U1 and V1 pad. Why? Why is everybody pulling off just those pads? The answer is because they were already broken. So if there's already a severed connection between the pad and the trace that it connects to, when you take the chip, the pad is going to come off with the chip. And so that's sort of what told us or pointed us to this signature fault at the U1 and V1 junction underneath the baseband CPU. That is not all of the cases of searching no service, but it's really, really common. So we'll include that as a signature fault. Now, the 6 Plus that I have here, I have a hunch that it's going to be the signature fault because this phone already had touch disease. So when you have a phone that the use of the phone in that user's hands created touch disease, that means they're kind of a pocket user, or they just are a bendy person. And so a phone that already had touch disease that now has searching no service, that's a really good candidate for having that same signature fault, the underlying biology of pulled traces underneath the baseband CPU chip. Now, if this phone did not previously have touch disease, then it would be a much broader problem, because I would have to go check, does the phone have an IMEI? And so you can check, it's kind of like your first clue. Let's see if this phone is booted. Let's see if we can not reveal this user, because his info is everywhere. So let's see if I can find that. So let's go, let's just kind of look at his phone. You guys can't see this, but I've gone to settings, about, and I'm looking to see whether or not it has firmware and an IMEI in all of this sort of basebandy stuff down here in settings. And this one does. So what does that tell me? That tells me that there's probably not a major fault in the baseband power management chip, because the phone is able to interact with and hear from baseband. It just can't make a call. So this phone says no service. And if I sit here and I toggle airplane mode off and on, it will say searching, 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 and then it will click over to no service. That is the fault. Now, this is a little bit complicated here at iPad Rehab, because we're sitting in an AT&T dead zone. So when I'm actually working on these phones, I have to go run out to the front where we can actually get a bar or two of AT&T service. So I already did that, and can confirm that with an active AT&T SIM, that this phone's IMEI is not blacklisted. So that's a good way to have the searching no service problem. And I can see that it has the IMEI in settings, and when I dial star pound 06 pound, it shows me an IMEI. So those are your sort of two first tests, because that can kind of give you a little bit of information. If you don't see that IMEI in settings, or when you dial the star pound 06 pound, that kind of tells you, hey, you've got a broader problem that may not be the signature fault. So let's take this board out and see if we can fix it by addressing that signature fault. So for this one, because of the history, touch disease, and because it's producing its IMEI, that tells me, all right, I don't think that the problem is going to be on all the pages that are related to, hey, is there any power to baseband at all? I think there is, but it can't get service. So why not? I'm going to guess that on this one, we're dealing with our signature problem, which is a poor, loose or fritzy connection under the baseband CPU. And so that'll be a fun one to fix, because we're going to try out some of the new iPad Rehab stencils for reballing and see which one we like better. I have two cases here. The other one is an iPhone 6. Now, the iPhone 6 that we're going to work on also produces its IMEI, and that one might be a little bit less classic. So we might want to take some time and measure our baseband power lines. Are we getting power out of the baseband power management chip itself before we just jump into it? All right, so let's click over and see who's around today in chat. All right, so it looks like we've picked up some chat folks, and I am going to take off the shields while we read some chat so that we can find our way to the baseband. Well, let me take off this sticker. To the baseband CPU, that our plan is to take it off, reball it, adding some support to the poor U1V1 connection. I'm only going to do the one that is not for GPS. I don't even remember which one that is, so we'll find out. All right, let's see. Where'd Waldo go? Not sure. All right. Is the no IMEI problem the same with this? Well, it's one of those 20 pages of schematic. If you have no IMEI, then it may be a baseband CPU fault, but it also could be more broad. It could be that you have a baseband power management fault. So you might want to start there. Let's see. Is iPad rehab all women firm? Well, if you think Mark's a chick, then yes. All right. Okay. Let's see. We're looking at comments. Please, bro, replace baseband IC with jumper, bro. Yeah, that's one of the things that drives me crazy is people using the word baseband IC. Dude, there's 20 pages of ICs, so there is no baseband IC. All right. Okay, let's see. So much, please, bro. Here's a good question. Jessa, if you do a touch IC and you send it back working and then it presents a baseband issue, how do you have that scenario? Well, it's right here in front of us. That's exactly how this one came to us. Now, here's the thing. That's we have added some text on our incoming form to make users sending a phone in for touch that this is a unrelated yet fairly common secondary issue in 6+ because it shares that same underlying biology. The problem is, and the way I describe it to customers, is that if you buy some eggs and one of the eggs is cracked in the egg carton, it looks fine, it works fine, you've got 12 eggs there. And it doesn't really cause a problem until you take the egg out of the carton and then it just crumbles in your hand. So you may have a phone that you think just has touch disease, but then when we take the board out, that action of taking the board out in order to do the touch disease microsurgery, and we'll show people that the touch chip is way on the top of the board and the baseband stuff is way on the bottom of the board, that you may find that after the touch repair, it has an unrelated searching no service problem because of this taking a cracked egg out of an egg carton phenomenon. And so what we do, we used to say, you know, sorry, can't help you, that's a secondary issue. Then we would kind of do a case by case you know, scenario. I mean, I understand it really sucks to send in a phone for an expensive repair to get your touch problem fixed and then to find out that it has this secondary issue. Most people can understand the egg carton analogy and accept that it is a secondary issue. Some of them I've done a sort of a courtesy no fix for them and refunded them so that they could go replace the phone. Others, I have said it's, you know, a secondary issue. Now that we have that really on our, be aware of this reality, because that is not part of our no fix, no fee guarantee. And we have extended no fix, no fee guarantee for touch disease that covers anything that is related to touch surgery. So anything that's related to the little dudes or, you know, backlight, anything's related to ambient light sensor, proximity sensor, you know, anything that is really a function of heat on the board by Mason, we cover that under no fix, no fee. But baseband, that's totally south. That's not part of it at all. And so recently we've started offering for our touch customers the chance to buy a second service. So this guy has approved a second quote. So this guy is here to get his secondary issue solved. Hopefully we can help him out. But that is a bit of a tough program. All right. Okay, so maybe some guys in chat can answer each other's baseband questions while we get started on this one. All right. When can I expect you in Serbia? It'll be a while. All right. I have a friend that this happened to him. It started after a screen replacement. Yeah, twisting the board, that's going to happen. Okay, let's see if you guys can answer each other's questions while we take off the sorry, Lionel, you got to take a hike. So we're gonna uncover the baseband CPU, which lives under the difficult shield. So we're already starting off with a difficult repair here because we've got to take off the shield that's difficult to remove, and we need to put it back on. Now here is where you can actually cause a problem for your baseband stuff. When we take the shield off, it's really not uncommon to knock or nudge any of the ICs that are in this bottom half of the phone. And those guys can then contribute to a baseband problem, a searching no service problem. All right, so I'm going to move this camera away, and today hand camera decided it didn't want to cooperate. So I am going to try to take off my bottom shield, hopefully without causing a big slide. Now before I do anything else, once I get the shield off, I want to correct. I want to look at it and correct any kind of slide of components that got shifted before continuing on. Okay, let's see how I did. All right, is anybody shifted or slid on this one? And I'm looking specifically, you know, for like this dude here on the corner. Are you still straight? Has anybody slid around a little bit? And on this one, I think the answer is no. I got away with it. Now here is our baseband CPU. This is not baseband IC, bro. This is the baseband CPU. On the other side of the board is the baseband power management chip. And then all these little dudes in here, there's your antenna switch, and there's some of your power amplifiers. These guys are all important, and they all need to be there for baseband stuff to work. All right, let's go ahead and see if I can do the 6 that we're trying to work on at the same time. So I've got the 6 also board out. This board I didn't look at, so let's just kind of glance around and see if we have something simple like an antenna problem. So I just want to kind of put my eyes on it to make sure that we don't have like something messed up that's easier to fix than reballing our baseband CPU. All right, so this is not water damage. Nothing's really jumping out at me. If a phone has a history of water, that's really going to change your repair. Water means corrosion and stuff under chips and shorted caps and things like that. So that will definitely change the picture of your repair. All right, let's go ahead and similarly try to take off this heavy-duty shield on the iPhone 6. And let's see if I can also not cause a big slide on that one. So to get these shields off, I use full heat, full air, and I hold the board very, very close to this blue mat. In fact, a lot of people complain, the blue mat bubbles up. I don't want it to bubble up, it moves the board. Well, I like it to bubble up on this because it kind of rises up to cushion the board so that it really doesn't drop at all. I'm going to go around and around, and I'm going to try to find the sticking point. Where is this one kind of, you know, sticking? What's still keeping it held to the board? All right, this one had a little bit more of a drop. Let's see. Let's see if I got any kind of slides. All right, I don't see any slides on the 6 either, so we'll put that one over there. And let's get back to the 6 Plus, and we are going to now try to take off our baseband CPU, and we'll see whether or not those U1 and V1 pads are pulled or intact, and we'll make a jumper regardless. What does that shirt say? My shirt says, "Do you even solder, bro?" Which is available on iPad Rehab Supply. So go to iPadRehab.com, and you too can order a cool iPad Rehab shirt that says, "Do you even solder, bro?" or "I void warranties." All right. That shirt needs to be changed to "Do you even solder, bro?" Yes. Okay. Alrighty. Hi, Jessa, store manager, shop here in Arizona. Look forward to taking the class. Alrighty. Okay. All right. We're all caught up on on chat. So let's get out the board holder that I like to use for these jobs. So I'm going to use my Fine Fix board holder and get this sucker in here so that we can try to get this chip off, because we need to preserve the chip. We got to stick this chip back on. Remember, the baseband CPU is one of the few chips that is unique to the phone, so we really can't destroy it. I'm going to make this kind of match what I'm looking at. All right, so what do you guys think is going to happen with the whole Qualcomm thing? Do you think that Qualcomm is going to provide Apple with their secret information that they want, or is Apple going to ditch the Qualcomm chips in the next phone? All right, so the place where there's torn pads is usually kind of along this border. So let's memorize our dot, and let's see if we can get this chip off. So there's not much more I can back out of here. All right, so let's see, how am I going to take this off? Let's see if I have a pair of tweezers that are less jacked than other ones. All right, let's see if these ones are wide enough. Not really, not quite. All right, so I'm going to add some flux. And I'm going to remember my dot. Now, those of you guys that do these repairs all the time, we really don't. We have largely been avoiding this whole mess up until recently. So we have only done a few of these. So why don't you guys share your experience? Who has been doing a lot of these, and what have you learned? And those of you guys that are doing the long jumper solution like we're going to demo here, how has that been working out for you? How many have come back? Let's see if we can get this chip off. The middle of the chip is ground, and that's going to be a little bit harder to heat up. I'd like either a bigger nozzle or a few more degrees here. There we go. Okay, so, you know, knocking some dudes here, there. When you see something like that happens, it's easy to have like an, oh shit, I nudged some guys, ah! But if you just relax, they will likely just kind of, you know, nudge like you elbowed the dude at the bar and go back home on their own. So don't freak out. Okay, so on ours, we don't have any pulled pads, and we're going to just kind of clean this up a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and reball this chip. So as you guys know, I'm not a fan of braid, but if I was going to braid, I would braid a chip like this, because it's big. But what I like to do is just tin over the chip with leaded solder. I like how tinned leaded pads create nice little mounds of tinned, ready for solder pads. All right, so we can't have too much flux here on our cleanup. So we'll get plenty of flux on here. And I usually start here in grounds, because if I mess up something, ground doesn't really care that much. And it just kind of gives me a feel. All I care about is having things just kind of being fairly even, so I'm really just collecting up these balls. All right, I'm going to rotate that around. Where did it go? I lost the whole board. All right, I'm going to have to nudge that over a little bit. And I use a wet paintbrush here. I'm using a tin tip. All right, so that looks good to me. Everything is nice and tinned. Little puffy pillows. I like to solder on top of puffy pillows, not naked cobblestone pads. But that's my preference. Okay, so there we have our baseband CPU. All right, pads are done. And we need to deal with our jumpers, but first let's go ahead and reball this chip so that it is ready. I kind of want to do the 6 at the same time, but I also want to kind of work, you know, so that I can preserve the heat on the board. All right, let's look at the chip itself. And I'll let you guys vote on which stencil to try out here. All right, so here is our chip. There's our chip. And I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom of the chip. Just going to mow down these balls. Very, very lightly. See how there's a couple of pads here that are gray? I don't like gray oxidized pads. I don't care about dirty pads as much, but I don't like gray ones. There we go. So now they are all fairly uniform. Okay, so to me, they all look like puffy pillows, and they all look like they are ready to make a joint and accept solder. So there is no right or wrong way to do a lot of this. It's kind of your personal style, your personal preference. I don't think there's anything wrong with braiding as long as you have a good reason. If you're able to say, I'm braiding because I want my chip to be really, really flat, or some specific reason, then by all means, go ahead and do it. If you're braiding because the internet told you to, that's a bad idea. All right, now I've got 2 choices of stencils here, and let's see what you guys want to pick to use today for this one. I think I have 2. I thought I got out 2. Here we go. All right, so we have 2 stencils, and I'm doing a bit of kind of stencil comparison so that we can know exactly what we want to offer at iPad Rehab Supply Store. All right, so first is the relatively new 3D BGA stencil. So let's take a look at that, and we'll see what we like and don't like about it. It has square holes. I like square holes. It has a indentation, and it's fairly thick. It's a heavy-duty chip. So see how the chip itself is going to actually go into the stencil. That's what makes it a 3D stencil. So that's the 3D stencil. And then we have our other stencil, which is my general favorite, which has square holes. And these holes, I like the size of them. They generally release the chip. All of the balls have to do the job of starting on top and going through the stencil and dropping down onto the chip itself. And I like these square holes ones. They tend to do that pretty well. All right, so which one should we use? The regular standard square hole stencil, which has more chips on it, so you can do more chips with it, or should we try out the 3D stencil, which has fewer chips that you can use? So let's see. So we have Joe Ham votes for the Geek Bar 3D ones, square holes, 3D, 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 3D. One is voting for not 3D. All right, so a bunch of people have been saying 3D, so we'll go with that. Alex says, I've been looking for a single square stencil with a base. So the stencil is the height of the IC, so when flexing it, you're not pressing on the stencil at all. Well, don't the 3D ones kind of fit that bill? All right, there we go. 3D is not good. Okay, 3D have the vote. All right, great. Okay, so let's see what that looks like then. Let's see if this is the right 3D stencil that I happen to grab. Otherwise, we're not going to have a choice. All right, so let's look at our chip. So I'm looking, is there any reason why this wouldn't work? So I have some alcohol in here that I want to get off. And I'm going to say, looks okay. I'm going to grab a paper towel and just make it a little bit more dry so that things don't slide around. Okay, and now let's see what is it like to line up this 3D stencil. So I'm pretty sure this is the right one, A8. Okay. We're gonna find the little corner edge, which is here. And I'm going to move that around so that it matches how this stencil fits on here easily. All right, so I can see that I've got a missing end there, the little notch. The triangle shows me the kind of start of the chip. All right, so let's see what it takes. I have not used these stencils on this chip, so this is a first time for me. So this will be what you can expect if you are a noob that has not used the stencil. We just got these in, and I'm trying out a couple of different kinds of 3D stencil. So this is the first one up for grabs. All right, let's see if we can overlay this. And I think that I could just kind of pop it in from the other side, and it will fit in there pretty nicely. All right. That doesn't seem like quite an exact match. There we go. All right, let's see if we can pick it up and see it, if it stays in there, if we kind of slide it off. So that you guys can see. The chip itself is it's resting in there, so I can even press it into the stencil. Now let's look. This chip does sit up. It's not totally recessed. It's not perfectly flat there, which means that, you know, the chip itself is taller on this stencil than the 3D stencil itself. All right, but it's in there pretty solidly, and this stencil is fairly thick. Okay, so let's see how it looks here. Let's flip it back around. All right, so I mean this positioning is really important because this is what makes your balls, and you want your balls to be all even. Now, one way that you can do it, and this is in fact what I did on the last one of these jobs that I did, I wasn't using the stencil. You can use pre-made balls just to help get all of your solder balls perfectly even. If you use the 3-made balls, then that's likely to happen. Okay, so now let's put on a glove and we're going to apply some paste on here. All right. Okay, let's see. Let's see. What did I do with my paste? Use tape. I don't want to use tape, not with a 3D stencil. I do use tape when I am using not a 3D stencil, but I'm hoping that the 3D stencil makes it so that I don't have to use tape. All right, so I'm going to press this solder paste into these holes. And I just use a gloved finger for this. All right, now I'm going to clean it off with a conventional paper towel. Have you seen the iPhone X's sandwich logic board? Not in person, and I hope to never see it. I hope to never see that sucker. I mean, seriously, who's going to buy that phone? Nobody I know. Nobody I know. I mean, honestly, I hope it's a great solution that doesn't ever need a board repair because it's all sandwiched together, so maybe water won't get in there. All right, so we've got our paste. And now I'm going to go to a wider nozzle. And I'm going to drop my heat down. And I'm going to drop my airflow way down. Like half of the normal airflow that I would normally use. All right, let's try that. Okay, so let's see. Hope the paste will not go between the chip and the stencil. We'll see, won't we? All right, let's see how does this do. Now we need flux, but let me see if I can make that more clear for you guys to see this. I'm gonna go with, I'm not applying any additional flux, I'm just going with the amount of flux that is naturally within the paste, so it's a bit dry. Dry is good because dry means that the balls aren't going to want to jump up and have a party. All right, let's see what happens. I don't like that giant pube that's right on top, but what are you gonna do? All right, I'm taking off the pressure. Now I'm looking, does any ball look like it's still in the stencil instead of down on the chip? And I don't see any that are jumping out at me. Now a ball that's still like up in the stencil will usually be shiny, whereas the ones that are actually down on the chip will turn matte because they've kind of mixed in with a little bit of the remnants of the lead-free solder that's on there. Okay, so now let's see what happens if we just try to poke it out. Oh, I do see one. Look at this. This one, look at this. This is exactly what you want to kind of look for. See how this one ball here is shiny? That ball is shiny. Everybody else around is matte. I don't think I see any others, but that shininess means he is not on the chip. He is still up in the stencil. And if I take the stencil off, then he is going to stay behind on the stencil, which is fine. I can take him out and place him on there manually. But when I see that, I try to say, you know, hey, can you just behave a little bit? Can you just go down like you're supposed to? So I'm going to put heat on just him and see if I can get him to go down. Where's my dude? Go down, bro. Hang out with your buddies. All right, let's see if he is still silver. He is. All right, let's just try to focus on him as I punch it out and see if we can get him to go where he's supposed to go. Poke out, buddy. Stay in your spot. Oh, there's another one that's up. I'll deal with you later. And once you poke it a little bit and you can tell that nobody is keeping this thing from releasing, go with your chip. Come on, I don't want you to hang out in the stencil all day. All right, then you can kind of come from the other side and get your chip off. So what I'm doing is I'm going from the other side where the chip is, and I'm going to just pluck it off. All right, let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to tighten up my balls. So I'm going to get rid of these two stragglers. And get rid of these two guys. All right, so now I'm just going to hold the chip and I'm going to kind of reflow it to tighten up all of these balls. I'm going to go ahead and go back up on my airflow so that we can get this done. Okay, so they all tightened up, and you can see the one guy that we found that didn't leave the stencil. So we've got one little straggler. So let's go see if we can find him. One isn't that big of a deal. We can just kind of put him back. So let's look back and see if that one is still in the stencil. All right, where is it? There he is. Look at that fucker. All right, so let's try to get him. There's the little asshole now. All right, so we're gonna just stick him back where he goes. Now you can sit here and spend your life doing this, chasing individual balls. It's not what I really recommend for doing on a Friday night, but it can be done. I'll switch to a different tweezer. Okay, now I've got to try and get him to meld to the chip. I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to go back to my regular nozzle. Alright, let's see. Is this the reason for most SMD and devices been soldered with cold solder when we see them? Soldered with cold solder? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Alright, waiting for this to cool off so I can stick the nozzle back on it. The phone Mark was trying to fix 4 and 5 was not power on. What are you talking about? Why is the round hole stencil no good? It just doesn't seem to, it tends to have more of this problem, which is that ball was fine. He should have dropped down. Look, all the other balls can behave, but he decided to dance to his own drum, and he stuck in the stencil. Now with a round stencil, I don't know why, but the round stencil just seems grabby on the balls, and instead of just making contact sort of, you know, as the thing turns into a sphere where it's really only making contact on the center parts of the square hole, leaving the corners open, the round ball is really making contact with the stencil all the way around. So it tends to be more difficult to get the balls, all of them, to release. And when one of them or 10 of them don't release, then you either got to start over or do this business. All right, got to knock that airflow back down. All right, let's see. Where'd you go, bro? Alright, now he moved and I don't remember which is the one. Oh, there he is. I see the little asshole now. Alright, so this is a bit of a dance where you kind of have to just get him to go where he's supposed to go. He's going to want to suck onto his neighbor. There he goes. See that? He sucked onto his spot. So that is just, you know, trial and error. All right. So now our chip is reballed. I'm going to hit it one more time with plenty of flux now that everybody's on there to kind of tighten up everything so that I can scrub it a little bit. Now with practice, this can be a very routine and very quick job. With kind of doing it with a new stencil, you want to take your time for a few times. Okay, so that is our reball, and our reball is done. So we're going to move that over to the side. And I think it's probably wise to go ahead and work on just the 6 Plus and not reball a 6 and then mix up the two dudes' basebands. Alright, Lawrence says he failed today doing this with round hole. If you're new to reballing in general, my advice is to start with a tiny chip, something really small. Reball, you know, you could, for the practice of it, reball a TriStar. You'd never want to actually use a reballed TriStar because they fail due to electrical damage. So you don't ever want to, that's like putting somebody's used motor oil in your car when you do an oil change. Right, I'm going to clean the paste off of my desk here so that I don't get it on my board. But a size chip of a TriStar, that is fairly straightforward. So I would do that. Am I using the quick 861 hot air rework station? Not right here because I love my JBC and I will never give up on the JBC. You'll be prying it from my cold dead hand. But at home, I do use the Quick, yes. All right. Now we have to deal with our jumpers. So if we were to just say, hey, we reballed the chip, let's stick it back on there and see if it solves. Remember, this is just a guess. We're totally please broing here. We're please broing. This is a signature problem, and so that's what we're going with. Why can't we test and know for sure what the problem is? Well, it's because other than the few power lines, most of this stuff is data lines. So you need an oscilloscope and you're measuring ones and zeros. And, you know, it's really, really difficult to try to find an exact fault when you have so many. You know, we could sit here and diode mode the entire bottom half of the phone to try to find some sort of an actual evidence of a cold joint, an open line, or a short to ground. We're not going to do that. We're just saying, hey, this is the common fault because of the history. This is an iPhone 6 Plus with touch disease, a prior case of touch disease that now has searching no service. That is a pretty classic presentation of bendy twisty pulling at the U1 and V1 pads. So now history tells us that if we just stick this chip back on here, that it might work, but it will fail again. And that's another reason why we stayed the hell away from these repairs up until now. So you know, just like taking a touch IC off, reballing it and putting it back on, it'll work, but it will fail because all you're doing is resetting the clock on the problem. The same thing happens with these baseband faults. It doesn't really correct the problem. And since we're already kind of into it for so much work, we want to do whatever we can to try to correct the actual fault so that we don't end up having this come back for warranty. And this repair has been plagued with warranty for everybody. So the original thought when people first started seeing the torn U1 V1 pads was, hey, let's do 2 little short jumpers to the adjacent micro vias. And that also failed. And then the first I heard of it was Chris Long, so all credit for me goes to Chris Long, who said, hey, I am not only not going to quit on these bullshit repairs, I'm going to keep doing them, and I am going to try a long jumper solution. So why would a long jumper work if a short jumper doesn't? Well, the theory is that the break, the bendy twisty in the board isn't happening always right at the pad, especially like not in this case. These pads are intact. So that means if there's some sort of bendy, twisty, broken trace, it's not at the pad. It's anywhere along that wire in the board. So if you can get a bendy, twisty crack in the wire anywhere, it doesn't help you to just lift off the chip and put it back on there long term. It's not a solution. So the current thinking is, what if we run a long jumper? So let's take a jumper from the pad, U1 and V1, and go all the way back to its origin and make that whole thing a wire. A wire has more ability to withstand the normal flexion from daily use than a trace in the board does. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see if I can find some appropriate wire. And then we're going to look up U1 and V1 and run those jumpers and then stick this chip back on and see if that solves the problem. All right, here's some wire. So I want something that is relatively thin and kind of bendy. So I'm going to go with the 44 gauge wire. Yeah, actually I don't think this is the 44. I don't know what gauge it is. It's not as thin as 44. All right, but I'm going to use something that's about that thick. Something like that. All right, so now let's go on a hunt and look up the U1 and V1 spots. All right, so let's head over to the land of ZXW. All right, what is ZXW on right now? Let's see. It's on a 6 Plus, and we need to get over here to the baseband CPU, not the baseband chip. This is one of the many, many, many. Look at all of these baseband chips. So this is the baseband CPU, and we are going to find our buddies U1 and V1. So these are the guys right here on the edge. These are the guys. And if you think about the board overall, and where is it bendy, twisty, you know, kind of, it's almost like it walks a plank here at this joint here at the sim tray. So let's look. So U1, and this is what was typically torn. U1 would be pulled off, or V1, or both of them. Oftentimes they would both be torn off together. All right, so where do they go? All right, let's start with V1. So what the heck is V1? That is a circuit called, and we can look down here at the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see the bottom. I guess not. So down here at the bottom of ZXW, you'll have to take my word for it. This line is called BB_GPS_sync. GPS sync. Baseband GPS sync. All right, so what's that going to be important for? GPS. So how could we kind of remedy that? Well, where else did the line go? Let's look. Let's see. It goes from here under the baseband CPU. Oh, it goes under the regular CPU. That'll be tough. I don't want to run a jumper under the CPU. Where else? Anywhere else? Anywhere over here? How about down here? Let's look at the bottom side of the phone. Let's see. Give me a spot. Where can I connect it to? Hello? Is it me you're looking for? Yes. Where are you, GPS line? Okay. Answer. It's nowhere on that bottom half of the phone at all. And on the top half of the phone, it goes from baseband CPU to, ding, a test point under the SIM tray. All right, so if I want to actually run a jumper, a long jumper that would solve any kind of a crack in the track between the baseband CPU and, you know, as it makes its way down that via and goes back into the board, I'm going to have to desolder the SIM tray and run a jumper under there. Now that is more than I'm willing to do. So I am not going to run that jumper just because it is too much work to be a viable repair. I have to get the SIM tray off and back on. It's got to be all perfect and even. I'm not doing that. So what's the consequence? Well, I may end up with a GPS problem on this board because of that. Now, I haven't done enough of these to know whether or not that is likely to be true. Maybe you guys can chime in. My experience to date has been the ones that I've done, I have not run the under the SIM tray jumper, and they haven't, the handful of the ones that I've done have not come back. So I'm going to continue skipping it until evidence tells me that I really can't. All right, so we're gonna deal with V1 by saying, fuck you, V1, and let's talk about U1. All right, so U1. All right, so this one is called RF FE1 data. All right, seems to be important. Without it, we get searching no service. So it seems to be important. So where does this sucker go? Okay, give me a spot. All right, it goes under this chip, the QPoet chip. It goes under this chip. It goes under this chip, it goes under this chip, it goes under that chip. So I could run a jumper to any of those spots, and that would help bring service if I have a crack in the track kind of in this area on, you know, where the board is really bendy. So I could pick up any of those chips and run a jumper under it, or let's see if I've got a better spot down on the bottom of the board. All right, let's see. Hopefully you guys can see the bottom of the board. All right, so on the bottom of the board, hey, I've got a test point. Yay, I love test points. They're so easy to work with. All right, so on the other side of the board, I should see a row of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little test points, and I want to connect to this test point number 4 in the row. So that means I need to run a jumper around the edge of the board. That's why it's called the long jumper solution. All right, so let's get a wire there. So we need to connect from that dot all the way around to our 1, 2, 3, the U1 pad on under the baseband CPU. All right, so let's make that happen. So in order to do it, we're gonna have to take the shield off the other side of the board. So let's get busy on that, and let's try to speed this up so that we can get the hell out of here because it is Friday night. All day long I thought it was Thursday, but it is not. I was wrong. And I'm like, why is everybody saying have a good weekend? Like, I will, like at the end of tomorrow, I guess. I totally missed a day, I think. All right. Let's flip this over. Gotta take off my little antenna. What is a boom? A loud noise, Antonio. A loud noise. A boom is a loud noise. All right. Why is the SIM card so difficult to remove? Oh, the SIM card is not hard to remove. The SIM card tray. This whole piece. You gotta desolder it in there. You gotta desolder it all along the sides. You can't fuck it up. It's got plastic on it. The SIM card holder. That's what we're talking about. I would definitely take out the SIM card and run a jumper. That's all there was. Now, if it turns out to be important to do the under the SIM V1 jumper, then I would go for a strategy of trying to kind of cut into the edge of the SIM tray and find my way to make that connection without actually removing it. That's what I would do. But for now, it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. What is up with this? I got some TriStar. I'm interested to know whether or not this sort of, yeah, no way. This TriStar is either shrinkage of the silicone overcoat from the heat I put on the baseband CPU, which is a possibility. But right here, it really looks like someone has been here before me and kind of thought about a TriStar replacement and then abandoned it. But who knows? I guess it could be shrinkage. You guys that do this all the time maybe can know. All right, so I don't see my test points. Oh, where's my test points? Where's my test points? Let's see. All right. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See them? They're covered with paint. All right, so we're going to go for the number 4 one, but I'm going to check on that. iPad rehab. Why is it the older you get, the more or less energy drinks equals sleepy and alcohol equals wide awake? That question has a lot of variables, so I'm not real sure. I'm not totally sure what you're talking about there. All right, so we're gonna go for this spot here, and I'm just gonna take the paint off to expose a little bit of the underlying test point. Let's get that tin to make a nice, robust, sturdy connection for our jumper wire. We're doing this so that we can allow the phone to bend and twist without causing a crack in the track. We want this robust, a nice puffy pillow. All right, so I'm happy with that. A nice puffy pillow. Okay, let's get the end of our jumper wire tagged into there if I can still find it. What happened to you, jumper wire? No, don't jump off my desk. Can't do that. What are you thinking? All right. So I am going to solder it. You kind of have to choose which direction you want to go. I'm going to go in this direction because I want to be able to have the option of replacing TriStar later without having to worry about this wire. All right, so we're just going to solder that down into our spot. All right, so we're going to extend the long jumper around the edge of the board, and I am going to take advantage of this little hole. That way I'm not going to have my jumper really like exposed on the edge of the board where it could get ripped or knocked or something like that. I think that in the past I've actually done it the other way, so this is a little bit new. All right, so I'm pulling it through until I get some tension on it. I'm not sure. Maybe I should have gone the other way. I like the idea of it going through the hole. But it's really got to stay out of the way of this chip. Now if I wanted to, I could temporarily solder it here into the ground and then take that out later. I could add some of the green mask to kind of help hold it exactly where I want it to go. But I'm not going to do either one of those. All right, so let's do let's make sure we're in the right spot. So our connection point is the number 3 pad there, the U1 pad. All right, so let's go to the U1 pad. Those are my jankiest tweezers. Please read. I honestly think you should get a small company started in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. I don't know about that. I think you have to be more of an entrepreneur and less of a person that likes to fix boards for that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm leaving this jumper with quite a bit of play here. I want the board to be able to bend and flex without making it really tight and pulling on it. Now this is insulated wire, so I'm not really concerned about the ground there. But I will pay attention to it when I put back on the shield. In fact, I will probably cut the shield to not go there. All right, so now we are ready to put back on our chip. Will this video be available later? Okay. All right. It's a bad idea. No need any jumpers. Well, I disagree with that. I mean, we have certainly noticed with the touch disease repair that in the cases where M1 pad was present and intact, just like these, that even after you put a mason chip on there, the warranty refailure rate was still high. In fact, I still get calls, like I got a call this week, you fixed my touch disease 18 months ago, and now it's just come back. You're just resetting the clock. You're not really solving anything. So, we're going to kind of apply what we learned, which is if you put an M1 jumper like this, even when the pad is there, it doesn't fail again, because you can crack the track all you want, but if you have that reinforcing wire, it's a robust solution. You're always able to keep that line fully intact. So if the problem here for this signature fault is stress and tension and cracking the track there at U1, that we're going to solve it by having this jumper there, even though the pad is still present. So in my opinion, I think it's very important to, if you're gonna bother to do all this, you should absolutely reinforce your work with what we know is a fault. We know that this trace cracks all the time. So if you have for any reason, even if it's completely unrelated, if you've taken this chip off, you should put a jumper there, just because we know that's a common failure point. Okay, so let's see if we can get this chip back on here. All right, let's see. I have to find my flux. Where did it go? I put it back where it goes. All right. What are your thoughts on the iPhone X sandwich motherboard? Well, who knows? I think that they have, you know, a creative idea. I think that's fantastic. And if the board is robust and is protected from water damage and things like that because of that stuff, then great. Otherwise, you know, hopefully it just won't need any board repairs. I don't think a lot of people are going to buy the iPhone X, so hopefully I will never see one. All right, so I can see my dot that tells me where A1 is. Make sure I didn't pick up any stragglers there. Is that my dot? Because that's not how this chip goes. All right, I gotta look it up. I don't want to get it wrong. All right, let's see. Where is A1? I thought it was in this top corner. Am I totally wrong as usual? All right, yeah, it's in this other top corner. Good, because then that means it's gonna fit on my board. All right. So let's see. I'm going to check to make sure that that's where the little silver mark is. Yes, there it is. Okay. So that goes there. See the little divot? Oh, you guys can't see that. See the little spot here that's missing a pad? That's going to match the top edge of that board. All right, let's get this lined up. Fairly well. So now on mine, it's sitting on not flat pads. It's sitting on bumps. Nudge this jumper a little bit out of the way. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put it back in the board holder so that I can heat it without having the whole thing shift. Love the Fine Fix board holders. They are not cheap, but I really, really like these things. All right, so let's turn it around and get it in here. So I tried out a $500 piece of equipment today that I've had for a long time, just because people have been talking more lately about being able to detect capacitor faults in line. So I have a milliohm meter, and it didn't work. In fact, if I had to guess and say, I was looking for a short on one of the chestnut outputs on some iPhone 6s, and it could have been any of the chestnut caps. And if I had to guess, what did that meter say was the actual cap? It was like, if you had to say which one has a lower resistance to ground, this one over that one. And it was totally wrong. So that was a giant fail. Would have been cool though. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can solder this chip back on. Really need my thinner tweezers. Bend these out a little bit. All right, so I'm just gonna go by time. I'd like to give it a gentle nudge, but not with that jumper there. And then let's let it cool down. That was quite a bit of motion. So we'll see how that worked or not. All right, let's see. What are you talking about? Slider 68. Look at the board. Missing ball on the 1 pin. Yes. All right, let's see. Why are you making a jumper? I think we've covered that quite a bit. Alrighty. M1 jumper is always a smart move. Yes. Why don't you just do the jumper for test before without reball the baseband CPU? How are you going to get a jumper in between the SIM tray and the CPU to get in there? I think that would be... honestly, this video takes a long time because we're doing a lot of kind of teaching and explaining and talking about different variables. If I was here by myself, this job, you know, like in total would, you know, it would probably be 10 or 15 minutes to pull the chip, reball it, stick it back on. You know, when you're working by yourself, things go very, very quickly. So I don't think that it would be a big deal. It's very distracting to keep up a stream of conversation while also kind of thinking about a repair. That's kind of tough. All right, so I'm letting it cool down now so that we can test. All right, where did you acquire this knowledge? Assume you would say messing around, trying things. Mostly messing around, trying things. Sitting here doing it a lot, reading a lot of stuff on the internet, doing experiments, and trying to solve one board at a time. All right. I bought the stuff these guys use and I love it. So if you're new to reballing, you can buy on iPad Rehab Supply the exact solder paste that we use. You can buy our Chip Quick Flux. You can buy some different kinds of tweezers. You can buy the Fine Fix board holders. You can buy our stencils. I think the only ones that we have on the website now are the square hold, not 3D stencils, which I also really like, and that's the ones I generally use. So we're just trying out these 3D stencils, and we will see how it works. All right, so I'm gonna get this back together now, and we will see if it works or not. All right. How hot do you heat the board? You heat the board to be hot enough, not too hot. That you have to figure out yourself through trial and error. You heat it hot enough to melt the solder, but not much more than that. All right, so I'm not going to put the shields back on, but I am going to kind of reassemble this phone loosely so that we can see if it can get searching no service solved. If not, I would probably turn off the stream. This happens a lot. I'll stream for a long time explaining a repair, talking about thought process, and then you know, overlook something or just run out of time, and then turn off the stream and with 10 minutes of not trying to think and talk at the same time, fix it. I don't know how many times that's happened. Probably most of the time. Most of the time that I have not fixed something live, it is generally fixed. Either if I leave right away, like the first thing the next morning, oh, look at that, click, done. Or 5 minutes after the stream ends. I think like that last Data iPhone 7, that was definitely, I think the chat window was still going after it got fixed. All right. All right. Are you going to put the shields back? Absolutely. I always put back the shields. They're easy to tack back on with an iron. You know, that's very, very straightforward. And there's no reason to leave them off because you want to preserve your customer's ability to decide, you know what, screw the 6 Plus. You know, for example, if this were to have a warranty failure in 3 months, this guy may want to go to Apple, and he probably would, and say, screw the stupid 6 Plus. I'm going to go to Apple and trade it in. You wouldn't want Apple to decline him for an out of warranty swap. All right, now in order to test whether or not it has service, I'm going to have to run up to where we get service, which is open the door and stick the phone out on the corner. We get absolutely 0 bars in here. We used to have AT&T and that sucked. So I was waiting to do this stream to get a Verizon phone so that we could actually see it, but we got 2 AT&T ones, so I had to get them out of here. All right, let's see. Can you run through the process and how you diagnosed it? You can watch this video from the beginning. Okay, all right, I'm going to run to the front and see if this gets service. Actually, I need to take a couple of sims. So stand by. Need to take this sim. I'm not sure which one is the active sim. All right, stand by. Sorry, I can't turn the camera around. It doesn't go up here. AT&T. All right, here we go. See it? Not his name. God damn it! Damn it! It dropped. All right. So it worked. We got a bar of AT&T, which is the same thing that would happen to a normal phone. So it works. I wish that I could find a different way to prove that, but I don't think so. So we can see his. You know, we still see IMEI and firmware, etc. in settings. And when I tried that at my pre-diagnosis, I could stand out there for, you know, all day long, and I would never get any kind of service at all. So this phone gets the same connection to AT&T that a normal phone would get, and it gets the little 1 bar available at iPad Rehab. You guys that have come to the course, I know it's super frustrating for all AT&T users. They're like, seriously, you're a cell phone store and you have no cell service in here? So that is how you can do one way to solve iPhone 6 Plus searching no service problems, is to go after the signature fault. So remember, you want to start with your modem firmware and settings is intact, and you have your star #06# is showing your IMEI, because that really points you, it's not a diagnostic tool, but it just kind of points you to, yeah, this is a really good chance that this is a baseband classic fault, a baseband CPU U1 fault. You're going to have to reball the original baseband CPU and watch the beginning of the video to know that this is not the solution, bro, for any searching no service problem. This is one signature fault of which it's just the most common. There are lots of other ways that baseband can fail. There are 20 pages of schematic. Water damage will be a completely different beast. If it's not an iPhone 6 Plus or an iPhone 6, it's not a bendy phone, then it's definitely not going to be this problem. You could have a fault anywhere in your baseband power management chip. So if you don't see that IMEI number, probe around there first. So you have to make sure that you have baseband power working. You can try to reball the baseband CPU. It's all data lines. There's not really a good way to diagnose that other than try to reball it and see if that solves. Be aware that if you don't make the long jumper for this, that it's going to likely have a refailure because you're not correcting the original bendy twisty problem. If it's not baseband CPU and you've reballed it and maybe reballed it again, if your baseband power management chip is outputting all of its power rails, then you need to look further afield and you need to think about your transceiver, your power amplifier, your antenna switch. Look for any kind of shift in components from your shield removal. So baseband problems, searching no service problems are really, really broad. 20 pages of schematics. An entire team of RF engineers were working on just this one function while everybody else was working on the main board function. That it is perfectly reasonable to just say, hey man, I got a perfectly functional iPod Touch and I'm not going to mess with it. If you are having a problem with your customers where they have baseband searching no service problems secondary to your Touch IC repair when it wasn't like that before, explain it to them with the broken egg in a carton is fine until you open the carton, and help them to understand that it's the underlying design flaw that really creates both problems, even though the operating on one is unrelated to operating on the other. And you'll have vice versa, where on these 6 Pluses, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this phone came up with no touch because you're bending and twisting the board just to get it in and out of the phone. And that's the trigger for both of these problems. If you do a touch job and you have taken a phone that didn't work because it had no touch and you're turning it into a usable iPod Touch, that still has value. So you could approach a customer that's angry, hey, I've got this secondary issue that I didn't have before, and just offer to go no fix, which means you'll remove the Touch IC and return it to the original non-functional condition that it was before. I think that's also perfectly reasonable. All right, so let's see. How many days is the course? Our practical board repair school is 5 days long, 5 days of boot camp here in the iPad Rehab Sweatshop, where we will be putting you to work, teaching you how to think, how to read the schematic, understand, troubleshoot, and know your signature failures. All right, let's see. Schrodinger's egg carton, yes. Somebody's been doing this solution for a year. Removing the signal processor is never easy. Great, because this is the first time I've ever done it using the 3D Stencil. I like the 3D Stencil, I think. It will work because you heat it. Thanks for the vote of confidence in this robust repair. We have not had one come back. I would expect that eventually one will, but we'll see. You reheat it, it's temporary work. Wow, you're going to have to explain that. How about watch the video from the beginning and you tell me how reballing, running a micro jumper to solve the original signature fault, which is a crack in the track on the U1 trace. You tell me how the action of putting heat on the chip to solder it back on the board is a temporary solution. All right, yes, you have to come over and put your hiney in one of these chairs in order to come to Practical Board Repair School. We offer absolutely no online teaching or training other than what you're learning right here, right now. So I believe that teaching is an art. It's storytelling, it's leading you through a thought process, and it is very much based on feedback, where we will go in a different path every time. We work on real devices, then whatever real problems you guys bring or whatever comes up that week. So no 2 courses are the same, and it's a community, it's a group. It's important for you to see how are you faring in the context of a bunch of other students. And some people may find that, wow, I'm looking around, we're all hearing the same content, it's engaging and we're answering questions, but everybody else seems to know when Jessa says, so will it go up or down? They all go, it will go up. And I'm thinking, I have no idea. that then it's you, and maybe this isn't what you're meant to do. And so maybe go find another job or pursue something else. So I think that's really, really important. And you can't capture that with online training. So much. Mark is fantastic at the course because he has this unique gift of being able to see you soldering in real time and offer the tiniest little tip or adjustment, you know. And he'll sit down, he'll say, hop up for a second, and he'll show you what you're doing and then what he would recommend. And it'll be a tiny, tiny little nuance of a change. And when you ask people, what'd you get out of the course? They'll say it was these couple of teeny, tiny little things that make a world of difference in their soldering. You just can't do that online. And so we're absolutely not doing distance learning. All right. Is there any way, Jessa, that you can shop my listed tools for me and ship it to me in my country? You can order from iPad Rehab Supply tools that we sell, and we will ship international and an international quote. All right. So I think that I have looked at the chat enough. I've gotten yelled at for reflowing my chip, and that's why it works. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. So honestly, I don't recommend that you guys do any searching no service, but if you insist, that's your signature problem, and I hope that you are able to get these done without tearing your hair out, and I hope that you guys don't have a lot of warranty refailure rates. All right, so enjoy your 20 pages of baseband schematics tonight. Happy Friday, everybody.